Hitler believed no German would dare betray him. But the truth was growing in whispered conversations, in silent frustration, and in the quiet anger of working men who watched their country slide deeper into fear. Germany in the late 1930s looked strong from the outside. Marching soldiers, roaring crowds, and endless flags flapping across the streets of Berlin. But beneath the surface, shadows of resistance were forming. Shadows Hitler never imagined could come from his own people. The early days of Adolf Hitler's rise were marked by promises of jobs, unity, and national pride. Millions believed him, or at least pretended to, but among them were those who saw the danger long before the world reacted. One of these men was Georg Elser, a carpenter from the small German town of Königsbronn. He was quiet, ordinary, unnoticed. Nothing in his life suggested greatness or rebellion, but history often moves through the hands of simple men who choose to act when others stay silent. Elser watched the changes in Germany with unease. Factories where he once worked were redirected toward weapons production. Co-workers were arrested for small remarks. Neighbors disappeared after denunciations. And each year, the government tightened its grip. Hitler believed his own people were loyal beyond question. He believed fear would control the rest. He believed no German would dare to raise a hand against him. But Elser was not like the others. By 1938, he had seen enough. Hitler's aggressive expansion, his persecution of minorities, and the forced labor imposed on dissenters pushed Elser into a conclusion few Germans allowed themselves to reach. If Hitler remained in power, Europe would fall into war. Millions would die. No political group seemed capable of stopping him, and attempts from other countries only made Hitler more furious, more driven. Elser believed the only way to save Germany was to remove the man leading it to destruction. In his mind, the choice was clear, even if unthinkable. Hitler had to die, not out of hatred, not for revenge, but for prevention, an act he saw as necessary to halt a disaster still forming. Many Germans felt powerless, but Elser was different. He felt responsible. And once he reached this conviction, he began quietly studying Hitler's habits, appearances, and schedules. The Bürgerbräukeller beer hall in Munich stood out. Every year, on November 8th, Hitler gave a long commemorative speech there, celebrating the failed beer hall putsch of 1923. The hall was large, chaotic, filled with supporters, yet the security was surprisingly weak. People came and went freely during preparations. Workers, decorators, and technicians moved around the building with minimal checks. A carpenter working at night would attract no attention if he blended with the staff. Elser knew wood, stone, metal, and tools. He knew how to work silently. He began visiting the hall months before the attack, pretending to enjoy a drink while secretly observing routines, how guards moved, how the stage was constructed, and how close the wooden pillar stood to Hitler's speaking position. But this plan was not born out of impulse. Elser spent months preparing a device that would function without failure. He stole explosives from a quarry where he once worked. He took clock mechanisms apart to create a timer that could run for days. He tested detonation systems in remote fields, documenting failures, correcting them, and trying again. He had no partner, no financial support, no underground network helping him. He acted alone because he trusted no one. Each night he returned home exhausted but determined. And as Europe moved closer to war, Elser's resolve hardened. Hitler had already absorbed Austria. He had already taken Czechoslovakia. And now, in 1939, he was threatening Poland. Diplomats scrambled, newspapers warned, people feared what would come next. But Hitler believed fate protected him. He believed destiny guided every victory. He believed no man, especially not a German citizen, would dare challenge him. Elser's actions were a direct challenge to everything the Nazi regime claimed about loyalty. Inside Germany, resistance was nearly impossible. Speaking out meant prison. Questioning Hitler meant being watched. Opposing the party meant disappearing. Yet this one ordinary man quietly planned the most serious assassination attempt Hitler would ever face before the military conspiracies of 1944. By August 1939, as war loomed, Elser knew he had only one window left. Hitler's annual speech at the Bürgerbräukeller would be his moment, and if he failed, Germany would plunge into a conflict far worse than anything the world had seen. He carved out a small hollow inside the beer hall's pillar, working late at night, chiseling stone dust into his pockets, hiding marks with glue and wood shavings. No one noticed him. No one suspected the quiet man at the corner table. He believed time was running out. He believed no one else would act. He believed Hitler must be stopped. When September 1st arrived and German forces invaded Poland, war became unavoidable. Europe erupted. Britain and France declared war. Germany mobilized. Hitler's speeches grew more violent, more confident. The Nazi leader believed victory was guaranteed. He believed destiny protected him. He believed he could never be touched. Elser, meanwhile, continued his nights inside the beer hall, unnoticed by anyone. And with each stroke of his chisel, the world moved closer to a moment where one man could reshape history, not through politics or armies, but through a hidden device timed to explode beneath a dictator's feet. The days leading toward November 1939 passed with a strange mixture of silence and urgency. As Germany pushed deeper into Poland and Europe braced for the unknown, the Bürgerbräukeller in Munich continued preparing for Hitler's annual speech, unaware that a quiet visitor was shaping a moment that could change the course of the war. Georg Elser blended into the workers perfectly. Always alone, always patient, always careful. He came during evenings when the hall was nearly empty, pretending to inspect wood paneling or measure fixtures. When questioned, he calmly explained he was working on decorations. His confidence disarmed suspicion. Few imagined that this unimposing man carried tools sharpened for sabotage, poached explosives hidden in a bag, and a plan more precise than anything the SS could anticipate. Hitler believed no German had the courage to kill him. But every night, Elser proved that belief false. Inside the pillar chosen for the bomb, Elser had carved a cavity large enough to hold his device. It was back-breaking work. The stone was tough, the space concealed by wood and plaster, and each strike of the chisel had to be muffled. He carried dust home in his pockets, or scattered it outside to avoid detection. But as the chamber took shape, Elser's fear decreased. The idea that he might fail became more terrifying than the idea that he might be caught. The bomb itself was a masterpiece of improvisation. Elser had extracted dynamite from quarry charges, dismantled clock mechanisms with surgical care, and tested small explosions to ensure his components worked reliably. He knew that if the timer failed, if the explosive weakened, if any part misaligned, Hitler would survive, and Germany's path into destruction would continue. By late October, he transported the components into Munich, piece by piece, concealed in pockets and small bags. He never carried more than a few grams at a time, ensuring no single discovery could expose the entire plot. His timing mechanism was the most complex part. 2 clocks wired to a detonator, calibrated to fire at exactly 9:20 p.m. on November 8th, While workers scrubbed the floors and stacked chairs for the upcoming speech, Elser slipped inside the pillar and fitted the first parts of his device. He worked hunched and cramped, sweat dripping down his face despite the cold. Every sound felt amplified. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Yet no guard ever checked the pillar. No SS officer ever wondered why the quiet carpenter stayed until closing time. Each night grew more dangerous. Hitler's visit approached. Security increased. But Elser finished assembling the bomb with relentless precision, aligning springs, tightening screws, checking wires. When he finally locked the explosive inside the pillar on November 5th, he paused, breathing heavily in the dark compartment, realizing the world might soon change because of him. Outside the hall, Munich was drowning in propaganda. Posters with Hitler's face lined the streets. Radio broadcasts praised the coming speech. Crowds prepared to cheer. But beneath the surface, fear simmered. Many Germans sensed war would expand. Many knew the coming years would be filled with blood. Hitler believed victory was destiny. But destiny, Elser thought, was something men created, something men could destroy. On November 6th, Elser returned to the church tower overlooking the beer hall to check the sound of the bells. They helped him calibrate the timers ticking with near-perfect accuracy. The device had to run for 2 full days without losing more than a few seconds. Any deviation might spare Hitler's life. Elser's palms shook as he made the final adjustments. He breathed deeply, reminding himself why he had come this far. War had already begun. Poland was collapsing. Jews were being rounded up. Political dissidents vanished overnight. The Nazi vision for Europe was spreading like a storm. Elser believed that countless lives could be saved if he acted before Hitler pushed the continent into total destruction. He believed no rescue was coming. He believed the responsibility was his alone. By November 7th, the bomb was complete and sealed inside the pillar. Elser performed one last inspection, checking for loose plaster, stray marks, anything that might expose him. There was nothing. His work was invisible. And the hall bustled with careless confidence. Nazi officers joked, drank beer, argued about speeches. None saw the danger hidden within arm's reach of the podium. That evening, Elser ate a simple meal in a Munich cafe. He sat alone, hands clasped tightly, staring at the table. He knew he had only hours left. Once the bomb detonated, he would flee towards Switzerland, his only chance of escaping the Gestapo. If he stayed, he would die. If he succeeded, he would still likely die. But if he failed, millions might perish in the years to come. He walked through the streets one last time, looked up at the glowing windows of the beer hall, then turned away. Whatever happened tomorrow, his life's purpose would be fulfilled. He believed fate belonged to the brave. He believed he had acted for Germany, not against it. And he believed that no tyrant, no matter how feared, should stand unchallenged by the courage of a single man. At dawn on November 8th, Hitler woke in Munich, unaware that beneath the wooden beam from which he planned to deliver his annual proclamation, a bomb waited with silent patience. A clock was ticking. Danger was just inches from the place where Hitler believed he was safest. And Georg Elser, now leaving Munich under the cover of morning fog, whispered a final hope to himself, that history would not let his sacrifice be in vain. The winter of 1932 bled slowly into early 1933, and the streets of Germany trembled under the weight of speeches, marching boots, and the hollow promises that millions wanted to believe. Hitler walked through these moments with a certainty that frightened even the men closest to him. He believed destiny wrapped itself around him like a cloak, and every setback was merely a pause before triumph. For months he moved from rally to rally, each hall packed with desperate citizens, jobless veterans, disillusioned workers, shattered nationalists searching for someone to blame. And Hitler believed he was their answer. He believed the tide of history had chosen him, and in whispered talks with his inner circle, he repeated one phrase again and again: "The people will not abandon me." But inside the party, fissures were widening. Ernst Röhm, commanding the SA, believed the revolution should be real, violent, sweeping, uncontrollable. Others in the Nazi leadership believed restraint was necessary to gain power legally. Hitler balanced these forces like a man walking a frozen river, hearing cracks beneath his boots, but refusing to slow his march. By January 1933, Germany hovered on the edge of collapse. President Hindenburg was old, tired, and drowning in political pressure. Advisors whispered that Hitler could be contained, that he believed too deeply in public approval to risk chaos once he was given authority. It was a fatal miscalculation. On January 30th, 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor. From the balcony of the Berlin Chancellery, under torchlight and shouts that echoed down Wilhelmstrasse, Hitler believed the moment fulfilled a prophecy. He raised his hand stiffly, the crowd roared back, and the city trembled in blazing orange. But behind the spectacle, key figures in the military, the clergy, and even his own cabinet watched uneasily. Some believed they could control him. Others believed he would destroy the Republic slowly. Within weeks, the Reichstag burned. Smoke coiled across the night sky, and Hitler believed he had been handed a gift by fate. He moved like a general surveying conquered ground, demanding emergency powers, assuring the nation that enemies surrounded them. Newspapers printed his words as if carved in iron. Ministers bowed their heads, and the people, terrified and uncertain, believed the threat was real. But inside Hitler's private chambers, unease flickered. Foreign ambassadors whispered that he seemed more volatile, more aggressive in private than in his public speeches. He paced rooms at midnight, convinced that betrayal lurked inside every institution. He believed surveillance, purges, and new laws would secure his vision. Those around him nodded even when they disagreed, fearing that one wrong sentence could end a career or a life. By spring, the Enabling Act had reshaped Germany into something unrecognizable. Opposition parties dissolved or were crushed. Journalists who questioned policy vanished. Hitler believed Germany had finally, voluntarily chosen unity, though unity came at the point of a bayonet. His closest advisors noticed subtle changes, longer silences, colder stares, and a growing obsession with loyalty. He believed loyalty was the highest virtue, and the easiest to fake. As 1934 unfolded, tensions with Röhm and the SA reached a breaking point. Röhm believed he deserved a greater role, perhaps even a position that rivaled Hitler's authority. Hitler believed Röhm had become dangerous. Meetings grew tense. Letters went unanswered. Army generals complained that the SA was growing too powerful, too reckless. Hitler absorbed every warning with a quiet, simmering fury. The night of the long knives approached like a storm. Hitler travelled to Bavaria, believing only he could personally solve the crisis. He entered the hotel room where Röhm slept, stared for several seconds, and walked out without speaking. Hours later, gunshots echoed across Germany. Dozens were executed. Röhm was gone, and Hitler believed he had saved the nation from internal collapse. The purge transformed him. Those who saw him the next morning described a strange calm, a chilling sense of certainty. Hitler believed he had crossed a line from which there was no return. His enemies, real, imagined or invented, would be dealt with decisively. And the world, watching from embassies and newsrooms, believed Germany had slipped into something far darker than mere dictatorship, Yet even as power solidified, cracks widened again. Economic struggles persisted. Foreign leaders distrusted every word from Berlin. Hitler believed he could maneuver them, intimidate them, or overwhelm them. Advisors noticed that he rewrote facts to suit his mood. Maps became weapons. Conferences became performances. Every victory, he believed, was his genius. Every failure, he believed, was someone else's sabotage. Inside the bunker-like offices beneath the chancellery, he scribbled notes furiously late at night. He believed Germany needed more territory, more industry, more living space, but generals and ministers exchanged anxious glances whenever he spoke, because Hitler believed the world would never dare to resist him. And that belief, more than any speech, more than any decree, was pushing Europe toward catastrophe. By the end of 1934, the seeds of future disaster were firmly planted. Hitler believed the German people admired him more than ever. Crowds marched with banners bearing his image. Children learned songs praising him. Radio broadcasts turned his speeches into a daily ritual. The shadow he cast across the nation grew longer, darker, and harder to escape. But behind the applause, fear lived in every household. Parents warned children not to repeat private conversations. Neighbors eyed each other cautiously. And whispers spread in offices, train stations, and cafes. What happens if this man's beliefs lead the country to war? Hitler, however, heard none of it. He believed the silence meant approval. He believed destiny waited ahead, glittering, inevitable. And as he stood before cheering masses, hand raised high, no one, not even he, realized how unstoppable the machine around him had become. The years after 1934 transformed Hitler from a political leader into a figure who dominated Germany with terrifying certainty. Every step forward reinforced what he believed about himself, about power, and about the destiny he thought waited for the nation. And that belief, rigid, absolute, unshakable, guided decisions that pulled the world toward one of its darkest chapters. By 1935, the Nazi state felt like a machine turning without rest. Propaganda saturated every street corner, every radio broadcast, every school lesson. Hitler believed repetition created truth. If the public heard something enough, they would accept it, even embrace it. His ministers studied this method carefully, adjusting speeches and posters to echo his tone. Citizens began repeating phrases they barely understood, believing they were patriotic, believing they were safe. But beneath the cheering crowds lay a growing terror. Jewish communities felt the pressure first. Laws chipped away at rights piece by piece. Hitler believed this was necessary for what he called national purity. He spoke calmly, almost academically, about separating people from society, never acknowledging the pain he inflicted. In private, diplomats and advisors who questioned the harshness were dismissed. Hitler believed compassion was weakness. In 1936, German troops marched into the Rhineland. Generals feared it would provoke war. Hitler believed the Allies would not act. He was right, this time. The retreat he feared never came. Newspapers celebrated him. Crowds flooded the streets, and Hitler believed fate had confirmed his instincts. Each unchallenged victory inflated his confidence, making future risks inevitable. The following years unfolded like a sequence of escalating tests. The annexation of Austria in 1938 was met with massive public celebration. Foreign governments protested, but avoided confrontation. Hitler believed he could slice Europe apart without firing a shot. Then came the Sudetenland, then all of Czechoslovakia. His inner circle saw the pattern clearly. Every success fed his certainty that resistance was impossible. Hitler believed the world admired strength, and he believed he was the strongest man alive. At the same time, fear tightened inside Germany. Ordinary citizens learned silence was survival. A wrong word could lead to interrogation. A complaint could disappear someone. Hitler believed his police state prevented chaos. But in apartments, factories, and farms, people whispered about the future. Young men dreaded conscription. Mothers feared shortages. Jews feared everything. And yet the propaganda continued, claiming unity, claiming loyalty, claiming that all Germany believed in one destiny. In 1939, Hitler set his eyes on Poland. Generals gathered in tense meetings, urging caution. They feared a repeat of the First World War. Hitler brushed them aside. He believed Britain and France would not fight. He believed a quick invasion would shock Europe into acceptance. And he believed the Soviet Union could be controlled with a temporary pact. When he gave the order on September 1st, he believed the war would be short. He was wrong. Britain and France declared war. Millions braced for conflict. Yet, early victories fooled him into believing he was invincible. Poland fell. Norway fell. France collapsed in weeks. Hitler believed this proved his strategic genius. His generals saw something more dangerous, a leader who refused to hear warning signs. By 1941, he believed the Soviet Union would crumble like the others. He ignored winter. He ignored logistics. He ignored history. And as German soldiers froze outside Moscow, Hitler believed they simply lacked will. Inside the bunker complexes beneath Berlin, paranoia spread like smoke. Advisors feared bringing him bad news. Reports were edited to avoid triggering his rage. Hitler believed betrayal surrounded him. Allies watched Germany with growing determination. Resistance movements inside occupied nations grew stronger, but Hitler believed fear alone would crush rebellion. By 1943, the war had turned. Stalingrad fell. North Africa was lost. Cities across Germany were bombed until the night sky glowed red. Yet Hitler believed victory was still possible. He refused retreats that could have saved thousands. He ordered offensives no army could sustain. His belief hardened into delusion. Even in the final months, as Soviet tanks surrounded Berlin and Allied armies crushed German defenses from the west, Hitler believed miracles were possible. Generals begged him to allow civilians to evacuate. He refused. He believed suffering purified the nation. In April 1945, hiding in the Führer bunker, he paced the concrete halls in silence. Maps showed disaster. Reports confirmed collapse. But Hitler believed history would vindicate him. The shelling outside grew louder. Rooms trembled with each blast. Advisors whispered goodbye to loved ones. Hitler sat at a long wooden table, hands trembling, still insisting that armies existed on paper that no longer existed in reality. He believed loyalty would keep them fighting, but soldiers were surrendering in every direction. Germany lay in ruins. In the final hours, he dictated his last words, blaming others, accusing betrayal, refusing responsibility. Even then, Hitler believed the world had wronged him, believed he had been the savior, not the destroyer, believed destiny had turned against him unfairly. Moments before the end, outside the bunker entrance, Soviet shells shattered the courtyard. Dust fell from the ceiling. Guards exchanged nervous glances. Hitler retreated to his private room, closing the door behind him. And there, surrounded by the shrinking remnants of his collapsing empire, he made the final decision of a man who believed in nothing but himself. When the gunshot echoed, the Reich he believed would last 1,000 years ended in a single instant. Above ground, Berlin burned. Streets were rubble. Civilians stumbled through smoke-filled air, searching for the living among the dead. The world was left to reckon with a simple truth. One man's beliefs, unchecked, unchallenged, and absolute, had consumed millions of lives. In the ruins, survivors asked the same question. How did it happen? How did belief turn into catastrophe? The answer lay beneath everything Hitler did. He believed he understood destiny. He believed he could reshape the world through force, and the world paid the price for every belief he refused to question.